What would you sacrifice for love? Your career? Your country? Your entire identity? This isn't just a hypothetical question. For one brilliant woman, it was a reality that turned her world completely upside down. In 2019, Dr. Sarah Mitchell was a rising star at Cambridge University, on track to become one of its youngest professors. She had it all: groundbreaking research, a prestigious fellowship, and a future perfectly planned within the hallowed halls of academia. Her life was a testament to ambition and intellect. But then she met Rashid, and their meeting wasn't in a lecture hall or at a conference. It was in the most unexpected place imaginable, a place that would rewrite her destiny. Within just 18 months, Dr. Sarah Mitchell vanished from Cambridge. Poof, gone. Her colleagues were stunned. Her family was heartbroken. The academic community buzzed with whispers, calling it career suicide. A brilliant mind, a promising future, all thrown away. That's the story everyone told. But what they didn't know, what no one could have guessed, was the real reason she left. It was a secret so profound, so unbelievable, it would make you question everything you thought you knew about love, purpose, and following your heart. This is the true story of a love that blossomed in the vast, unforgiving desert. It's the story of a choice that defied all logic and expectation. And when you finally hear the unbelievable reason behind her disappearance, you'll see why her decision wasn't an ending, but the beginning of a journey far greater than any career. This story will challenge your perspective and stay with you long after you've heard it. So, are you ready to uncover the truth? We're about to dive deep into the real story of Sarah and Rashid, a tale of sacrifice, courage, and a love that truly changed everything. Let's rewind to where it all began. Cambridge, England, September 2018. Picture this: Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a brilliant 29-year-old, seemingly living the dream. She had everything anyone could ever want. Born and raised in Manchester to a middle-class family, Sarah wasn't handed success on a silver platter. She fought for it. She clawed her way through a mountain of scholarships and countless sleepless nights, all to reach the very pinnacle of academic achievement, her field of study. Desert ecology and climate adaptation, it's a bit ironic, isn't it? A young woman who had barely set foot outside of rainy England was now one of the world's leading experts on its driest, most unforgiving places. But Sarah wasn't just good at her job. She was a true prodigy. Her research was groundbreaking. She was studying how ancient desert plants, some thousands of years old, managed to survive in the most extreme conditions imaginable. And she was on the verge of a major breakthrough, one that could change medicine forever. Naturally, the world was taking notice. Big pharmaceutical companies were knocking on her door, eager to fund her work. Prestigious scientific journals were calling, begging to publish her findings. And Cambridge, the esteemed institution where she worked, was preparing to offer her a permanent, highly coveted position. Her life was like a perfectly constructed tower of achievement. Every single brick had been placed with meticulous precision. Every step she took was carefully calculated for maximum success. She even had the perfect academic boyfriend, Marcus. He was safe, predictable, and he understood the long nights spent in the lab and the pressure of conference deadlines. They had been together for 3 years, and everyone, from their colleagues to their families, was expecting an engagement announcement any day now. In fact, Sarah's mother, ever the planner, had already started looking at wedding venues. From the outside, her life was flawless, a perfect picture of success and stability. But on the inside, Sarah felt a profound, gnawing emptiness. She couldn't explain it, not even to herself. All this success, all these achievements, they felt hollow. Her relationship with Marcus felt more like a professional partnership than a passionate romance. He was a colleague, not a soulmate. And every single night, as she sat alone in her office, staring at satellite images of vast, remote deserts she had never seen with her own eyes, she felt an undeniable pull. It was a strange, powerful calling echoing from those distant golden sands. It was a whisper of a different life, a different path, one that was wild, unpredictable, and a million miles away from the perfect, manicured world she had built for herself. The desert was calling her name, and she was beginning to realize she might have to answer. What happens when a woman who has everything decides to risk it all for a feeling she can't even explain? Sarah's journey was just beginning, and it was about to take her to a place she never could have imagined, forcing her to confront not just the secrets of the desert, but the secrets of her own heart. The carefully constructed tower of her life was about to face a storm, and nobody, least of all Sarah, knew if it would stand or crumble into dust. This is the story of how she found her true self, not in a lab in Cambridge, but under the vast, starry sky. Then came November 2018, an email that would change everything. A research consortium was offering a 3-month fellowship in Jordan, working on a groundbreaking project to restore degraded desert ecosystems. It was exactly her field. The opportunity of a lifetime. Now, you'd think this would be a no-brainer, right? A dream come true for a scientist like Sarah, but everyone around her saw it differently. Marcus, her partner, thought she was crazy to even consider it. He said, 3 months in the Middle East. Sarah, you're up for tenure. This is terrible timing. He just didn't get it, and it wasn't just him. Her own department head, the person who was supposed to be her mentor, advised against it. His words were, "You can't afford to disappear right now. Send a graduate student instead." Think about that for a moment. Everyone she trusted, everyone whose opinion mattered in her professional life, was telling her to stay put, to play it safe, to follow the well-trodden path to academic security. For years, Sarah had been living by the book. She ticked every box, jumped through every hoop, and was on the brink of achieving the one thing she'd de-worked her entire life for: tenure. It was the ultimate prize, the validation of all her hard work and sacrifice. But this email, this opportunity, it sparked something in her, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of excitement, a genuine sense of being alive at the possibility. It was a feeling that had been buried under piles of research papers and faculty meetings. It was a call to an adventure she didn't even know she was craving. So, what did she do? Against everyone's advice, against all logic and reason, she accepted. She packed her bags, reassuring herself and everyone else that this was a purely professional decision, a strategic career move, a research opportunity that would look great on her resume. She told herself she'd be back in 3 months, ready to slot right back into her life, and her career would continue its perfect upward trajectory. Everything would be exactly as she left it. She had absolutely no idea that she was walking away from the life she knew. She had no idea she was about to meet someone who would completely dismantle everything she thought she knew about love, about ambition, and most of all, about herself. She thought she was going to Jordan to study a desert ecosystem, but what she was really about to discover was the uncharted wilderness within her own heart. And that journey would change not just her career, but the entire course of her life. This is the story of how one decision, one leap of faith against the current, can lead you to a destiny you never could have imagined. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest risks lead to the most beautiful rewards. February 2019, Sarah stepped off the plane in Amman, Jordan. The heat hit her first, even in winter. It was warmer than an English summer. Then the sounds, the call to prayer echoing across the city, the constant symphony of car horns and Arabic conversations flowing like music. Everything was foreign. Everything was overwhelming, a complete sensory overload. But this was just the beginning of her journey. Her destination was a research station deep in Wadi Rum, a vast desert in southern Jordan. You might know it. It's famous for its towering red sandstone mountains and ancient Bedouin culture. It's so otherworldly that movies like Lawrence of Arabia and The Martian were filmed there. It truly looks like another planet. Imagine leaving the familiar green of England for the endless, majestic red of a desert that looks like Mars. That was Sarah's new reality. On her first night in the desert, sleep was impossible. Not because of discomfort, but because of the sky. When she stepped outside her tent, she was met with a breathtaking sight. More stars than she had ever imagined existed. The Milky Way wasn't just a faint band. It was a brilliant, shimmering river of light stretched across the darkness. The silence of the desert was profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind. She sat on a cool, smooth rock, wrapped herself in a blanket against the gentle desert chill, and just looked up. For the first time in years, maybe ever, she felt small. But this wasn't a terrifying, insignificant smallness. It was liberating. It was the feeling of being part of something immense and beautiful, something so much bigger than her own worries and ambitions. In that moment of quiet awe, she whispered to herself, "This is what I've been missing." She had no idea how right she was, because the very next morning she would meet Rashid. And from that day forward, nothing in her life would ever be the same. This journey wasn't just about discovering a new place. Rashid al-Zawari was not at all what Sarah expected. When her research team told her they'd hired a local environmental guide, she pictured a much older man, maybe in traditional robes, someone who would patiently show them the ancient secrets of the desert. She had it all mapped out in her head. But the man waiting for them by the Land Rover was a world away from her preconceived notions. Rashid was 32, dressed in practical, modern hiking gear that looked like it had seen its fair share of adventures. He spoke flawless English, with just a hint of an American accent. She'd find out later he got it while earning his Master's degree in environmental science at UC Berkeley. But none of that was what struck Sarah first. No, the first thing she noticed were his eyes. They were dark, incredibly intense, but they held a warmth that put her on edge, jet-lagged self at ease almost instantly. And then his hands. They were weathered and calloused, strong hands that looked like they belonged to someone who truly worked with the earth, someone who didn't just study it from behind a desk. These were the hands of a man who lived and breathed the very environment she was here to research. Their first exchange was almost comical in its awkwardness, something she would cringe and laugh about later. He extended one of those capable hands. "Dr. Mitchell, I'm Rashid. I'll be your guide for the next few weeks." And Sarah, still feeling the fuzzy disorientation from a 17-hour flight, blurted out the first thought that came to her mind. "You speak English." A smile spread across his face, lighting up those intense eyes. "I do," he replied, his voice calm and amused. "I also speak Arabic, French, and a little bit of German. Will English work for you?" The heat rushed to her cheeks. She was so embarrassed by her own assumption, her own cultural blind spot. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to imply. It's just..." He cut her off gently, still smiling. "It's fine, really. You're not the first Western researcher to be surprised. And I'm sure you won't be the last." That smile. Months later, recounting the story to her best friend over coffee, Sarah would say it was that smile that started everything. It was the crack in the facade, the beginning of the end for the life she thought she had planned out. But in that moment, standing under the vast, unforgiving sun at the edge of a great desert, she just took his outstretched hand. A jolt, like a small static shock, passed between them. It was a feeling she couldn't name, a current of something powerful and unknown. She told herself it was just the dry air, the exhaustion, the surprise. She let go of his hand, grabbed her pack, and without another word, she followed him into the endless expanse of sand and rock, completely unaware that she was also following him into a new chapter of her life. The desert stretched before them, a blank canvas, and for the first time, Sarah felt a thrill of anticipation that had nothing to do with her scientific research. She was on the brink of a discovery, but it wasn't the kind she had come here to find. The real journey was just beginning. The first week, Sarah tried to keep things professional. He was Rashid, their guide, and she was the lead researcher. Her job was to analyze data to quantify the ecosystem. His job was to get them safely through the desert. Simple. But nothing about Rashid was simple. He would guide the research team through the vast, shimmering expanse, showing them ecosystems they'd only seen in textbooks. He knew every plant, every faint animal track in the sand, every subtle shift in the wind's direction. It was more than just knowledge, more than facts you could memorize from a book. It was a deep, intimate connection. Rashid spoke about the desert the way poets speak about their beloved, with a reverence that was almost spiritual. One afternoon, he knelt beside a scraggly bush that looked half dead to Sarah's untrained eye. "You see this plant?" he asked, his voice soft but clear. The team gathered around. "This is Ratama. Your research says it shouldn't be able to survive here. It's too hot, too dry. But it does. You want to know why?" Sarah nodded, her pen poised over her notebook, ready to capture the data. Rashid smiled faintly. "Because it doesn't fight the desert, it learns from it. Look, it drops its leaves in the heat of summer to conserve precious water. Its roots go down 10 meters deeper than you'd ever think possible, searching for life. It doesn't resist its environment. It becomes part of it." The way he spoke, the simple truth in his words, made Sarah see the desert differently. It wasn't just a hostile environment to be conquered or studied from a safe distance. It was a teacher, full of wisdom. At night, the research team would huddle together around the crackling campfire, the only light for miles under a blanket of stars, so bright they felt close enough to touch. This was Rashid's time. He would brew traditional Bedouin coffee, thick, dark, and intensely spiced with cardamom in a long-spouted pot nestled in the hot coals. As the rich aroma filled the cool night air, he would tell stories. Stories passed down through generations. Stories of his grandfather, a legendary Bedouin shepherd who could navigate the endless dunes by the stars alone, reading them like a map. He told tales of ancient tribes that crossed these very deserts back when they were lush grasslands, their histories whispered on the wind. He also shared stories of his own childhood, a life lived between two worlds. He spoke of growing up with the traditional Bedouin ways of his father's family, learning the ancient rhythms of the desert, and then spending time in the modern, bustling world of his mother's Jordanian city upbringing. He navigated these two realities with a grace that Sarah found captivating. As the nights went on, Sarah found herself listening less to the specific words of the stories, and more to the sound of his voice, a low, melodic rhythm that seemed to echo the ancient landscape around them. She found herself watching the way the firelight danced across the strong lines of his face, highlighting his dark eyes and the genuine smile that often played on his lips. "This is just cultural fascination," she told herself firmly. It's the exotic appeal of somewhere new, somewhere so different from her own life. It's the romance of the campfire and the endless stars. She was a scientist, after all. She dealt in facts and figures, not in feelings that couldn't be quantified. But as she watched him pour another small cup of coffee, his movements practiced and sure, she felt a pull, a connection that went beyond professional curiosity. Deep down, in a place her scientific mind couldn't quite label or dismiss, she knew it was more. It was the beginning of something she hadn't planned for, something as wild and unpredictable as the desert itself. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to analyze it. She just wanted to feel it. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I wanted to tell you a story. It's a story about finding yourself in the most unexpected of places and about the moments that change everything. It's a story called Desert Sunrise. 3 weeks into the fellowship, something happened. Sarah had wandered away from camp early one morning, a habit Marcus had always hated, but something she craved. She wanted to watch the sunrise alone. She found a perfect spot on top of a red sandstone cliff, a natural throne overlooking the vast expanse. She sat, watching the sun begin to paint the desert in strokes of gold and deep crimson. The silence was profound, broken only by the whisper of the morning breeze. Beautiful, isn't it? Sarah jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. She spun around to see Rashid standing a few feet away, his silhouette framed by the dawn. He had followed her, a silent guardian she hadn't even noticed. He must have been concerned about her being alone in the desert before the rest of the team was awake. "You shouldn't go off alone," he said, his voice soft, but his tone wasn't scolding. It was protective, filled with a genuine concern that surprised her. Even experienced locals can get disoriented out here. He gestured to the landscape, which was already beginning to shift and change in the morning light. "I needed to think," Sarah confessed, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Normally, she would have put up a wall, made a joke, deflected. But not with him. Not here. "About what?" he asked, his gaze steady and curious. She didn't know why she answered honestly. Maybe it was because he felt safe, like a harbor in the middle of this beautiful, intimidating wilderness. Or maybe it was the desert itself, stripping away her usual defenses, leaving her raw and open. "About whether I'm living the life I actually want," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "or just the life everyone expects me to live." It was a thought she'd pushed down for years, a question that haunted her in the quiet hours of the night. Rashid didn't offer easy platitudes or quick advice. Instead, he simply sat down beside her on the warm sandstone. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel the solid, reassuring presence of him, a quiet strength that seemed to emanate from him like heat from the rock. After a moment of shared silence, he asked, "And what do you want?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. The sun was fully up now, a brilliant orb hanging in the sky, and the desert stretched before them, endless, ancient, and uncompromising in its stark beauty. It was a landscape that demanded honesty. "I want to feel," she said finally, the admission feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I've spent so long building this career, checking all the boxes, following the path my parents laid out, the path my professors encouraged. I've done everything right, but I don't feel anything anymore. I'm successful, but I'm numb." She looked at her hands, the hands that had written acclaimed papers and secured prestigious grants. They felt like they belonged to someone else. Rashid nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the horizon as if he was seeing not just the desert, but the landscape of her entire life. "My grandfather used to say that Western people build their lives like houses," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Brick by brick with strong foundations and sturdy walls to keep things out. To keep life predictable and safe." Sarah thought of her meticulously planned career, her 5-year plans, her orderly apartment back in the city. A house. Yes, that's exactly what it was. "But Bedouin," he continued, turning to look at her, "we built lives like tents, open, movable, always ready to change with the wind, to follow the water, to adapt to the seasons." "That sounds unstable," Sarah said immediately. The very idea sent a jolt of anxiety through her. Unstable was everything she had worked so hard to avoid. "Or free," Rashid replied gently, a small smile playing on his lips. "It depends on what you value more, security or freedom." They sat in silence again as the desert air began to heat up around them, the world waking from its cool slumber. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was full, a space where understanding could grow without words. And in that shared silence, watching the ancient land come alive, Sarah realized two things with a clarity that was both exhilarating and terrifying. One, she was falling in love with this man. Not just an infatuation, but a deep, resonant connection to his soul, his wisdom, his quiet strength. And two, she was utterly terrified. Because falling for Rashid, really letting herself feel this, meant her carefully constructed life, her brick house, would never be the same. He was the wind, and she was a tent she didn't even know how to build. Her entire future, which had once seemed so certain, was now a vast, unknown desert. "We should get back," she said, standing abruptly. The vulnerability was too much. The implications were too overwhelming. She needed to retreat to the familiar, to the logic and order of the archaeological camp. Rashid stood as well, his expression unreadable. They started walking back towards the distant silhouettes of the camp tents. The silence was different now, charged with everything that had just passed between them. And then, as they navigated a narrow path between two boulders, their hands brushed. It was a small. After that morning, Sarah and Rashid became inseparable. At first, Sarah tried to rationalize it, telling herself they were just friends, colleagues. He was teaching her about the vast, unforgiving desert, and she was sharing her research findings. It was all perfectly professional, or so she thought. But the truth was plain for everyone else on the research team to see. They saw the way Rashid's gaze would follow Sarah as she moved across the camp, a quiet intensity in his eyes. They saw the way Sarah's entire face would light up, an undeniable spark, whenever he approached. And they noticed how their conversations would stretch late into the night, long after the camp had fallen silent and everyone else had retreated to their tents. Their voices, a low murmur under the desert sky, became a familiar soundtrack to the team's evenings. One night, with the sky above them, a breathtaking tapestry of stars, thick and brilliant in the clear desert air, Rashid opened up to Sarah about his life. He told her he had grown up in a small village not far from Wadi Rum, a place steeped in tradition. His father was Bedouin, a proud, traditional man, a survivor who could navigate the harsh desert for a week with nothing but water and a handful of dates. His mother, on the other hand, was from the bustling city of Amman. She was educated, modern, a teacher who championed progress and believed firmly in the power of new ideas. They fought constantly, Rashid confessed, a sad smile touching his lips. "My father was convinced my mother was trying to erase our culture, to wash away our heritage. My mother believed my father was stuck in the past, clinging to ways that were no longer relevant." He paused, looking out into the darkness. "I grew up right in the middle of it all, trying to be both. Trying to please both." Sarah listened, captivated. "So, which one are you?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. Rashid considered her question. "I'm both," he finally said, "and neither. I left for America to get my master's degree. I studied Western environmental science, learned all the latest theories and techniques. But when I came back home, I had a revelation. I realized that all that modern science was just beginning to catch up to what my grandfather and his father before him already knew. The desert doesn't need saving by outsiders who don't understand its soul. It needs the people who live here, who understand it intimately, to be given the resources and the respect to protect it themselves." "Is that why you came back?" Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued, "instead of staying in America?" Rashid nodded, his expression serious. "I could have stayed. I had good job offers, a comfortable life waiting for me. But this," he gestured with a wide sweep of his arm to the vast, silent desert that surrounded them, its dunes glowing faintly under the starlight. "This is home. This is where I'm meant to be. This is my purpose." Hearing him speak with such certainty, such conviction, Sarah felt a sudden sharp pang in her chest. A feeling of displacement, of being adrift. Because in that moment, she realized she had no idea where she was meant to be anymore. The path she had followed so diligently for years suddenly felt uncertain. "What about you?" Rashid's voice broke through her thoughts, gentle but direct. "What made you become a scientist?" Sarah hesitated. It was a question no one ever asked her. People always asked about her research, her data, her achievements, her next publication. They were interested in what she did, not why she did it. The question felt surprisingly personal, and she found herself searching for an honest answer. "I think I wanted to matter," she said slowly, the words feeling new and strange on her tongue. "I wanted to prove that I was more than just ordinary, that I could contribute something significant to the world, something that would last." "And have you?" Rashid asked, his gaze unwavering. Sarah let out a small, self-deprecating sigh. "I don't know," she admitted, the confession feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I've published papers in respected journals. I've received grants and funding, but I'm not sure I've actually changed anything. Sometimes it feels like I'm just collecting data while the world burns around me. Just observing, not acting." Rashid was quiet for a long moment, letting her words hang in the still night air. The silence wasn't awkward. It was thoughtful, respectful. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady. "My grandfather once told me that the most important work is not the work that makes you famous. It's the work that makes you whole." Those words struck Sarah with the force of a physical blow. The work that makes you whole. They echoed in her mind, simple yet profound. They would continue to echo, haunting her thoughts for months to come. In the heart of the desert, under a canopy of ancient stars, a seed of doubt had been planted, or perhaps a seed of truth. And Sarah knew, with a certainty that unsettled her to her core, that her life would never be the same. She had come to the desert to study its secrets, but she was beginning to uncover secrets about herself she never knew existed. And as she looked at Rashid, she wondered if finding her way home meant finding a new definition of what home even meant. With only 2 weeks left in her fellowship, Sarah knew she had to face what was happening. She was in love with Rashid. Deeply, terrifyingly in love. But she was also engaged, well, practically engaged to Marcus. She had a career waiting in Cambridge. A life. Her days in the vast Jordanian desert had been a whirlwind of discovery. As an archaeologist, she had spent months excavating a forgotten Roman outpost, meticulously dusting off pottery shards and cataloging ancient coins. Rashid, her Bedouin guide, had been her constant companion. He wasn't just a guide. He was a walking encyclopedia of the desert's secrets. He knew which plants could heal, which stars would lead you home, and where to find the clearest, coldest water hidden deep within the rock. He taught her to read the landscape, to see the stories written in the wind-carved stones. He'd shown her a world far beyond the dusty texts she'd studied for years. Their connection had grown slowly, subtly, like a desert flower blooming after a rare rain. It started with shared laughter over a mishap with a stubborn camel. Then came the long conversations under a canopy of stars so bright they felt close enough to touch. He'd listen, truly listen, as she spoke about her ambitions, her fears, her carefully constructed life plan. And she, in turn, was captivated by his stories of his family, his people, his profound connection to this seemingly barren land. She found herself watching him more and more, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the quiet confidence in his movements, the gentle way he treated every living thing. Marcus was the opposite of Rashid in every way. He was reliable, predictable, and ambitious, a fellow academic at Cambridge. Their relationship was built on shared goals and mutual respect. It was a partnership, a logical progression. They had a 5-year plan that included her professorship, his tenure, a house in the suburbs, and 2 children. It was a good life, a secure life, the life she had always thought she wanted. But next to the vibrant, unpredictable colors of her feelings for Rashid, her future with Marcus seemed to fade into a dull, monochrome photograph. The guilt was a constant weight in her chest. She was betraying him, betraying the promises they'd made, betraying the person she was supposed to be. One evening, as the sun began its fiery descent, casting long, dramatic shadows across the sand, Rashid found her packing away her tools. "Take a walk with me," he said, his voice soft. "There's something I want to show you." Her heart leaped. Just the 2 of them. away from the prying eyes of the rest of the excavation team. She agreed without a second thought. He led her away from the familiar paths, through a maze of sandstone cliffs she'd never explored. The air grew cooler as they descended into a hidden canyon, a narrow gap between two massive rock walls that seemed to touch the sky. The silence here was different, older. It felt sacred. Carved into the smooth, rose-colored rock faces were dozens of inscriptions, their elegant script worn by centuries of wind and sand. Wow, Sarah breathed, running her fingers gently over the ancient letters. Nabatean. But I've never seen these documented. I wanted to show you this, Rashid said, his gaze fixed on the carvings. These inscriptions, they're mostly forgotten now. The people who carved them, they were traders, travelers. They left their marks here, prayers for a safe journey, tributes to their gods. They thought they would be remembered forever. He paused, a wistful look in his dark eyes. But time makes small things of even our greatest achievements. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine, a strange melancholy settling over her. It's a little depressing, she said, trying to force a light academic tone into her voice. No, Rashid said, turning to face her. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. It's liberating. It's a gift. Because if our achievements don't last, if the monuments we build eventually turn to dust, then what truly matters? What is the one thing that endures? He took a step closer. What matters is how we live. The choices we make not for legacy, but for joy. Who we love. The moments that make us feel alive. Sarah's heart was pounding against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the profound silence of the canyon. She knew where this was going. She'd been dreading this moment and yearning for it in equal measure. Rashid, she started, her voice barely a whisper. I'm in love with you, Sarah. The words hung in the still desert air between them, simple, powerful, and irreversible. They changed everything. I know, he continued, his voice steady despite the raw emotion behind it. I know you have a life in England. I know you have someone waiting. I know this is impossible, insane. But I needed you to know, because in 2 weeks you'll go home. You'll get on a plane and fly back to your life, and I'll be here. And I will never, ever forgive myself if I didn't tell you the truth of my heart. Tears she hadn't realized were forming began to stream down her face, hot against her cold skin. The truth she had been so desperately trying to suppress was now out in the open, reflected in his honest, aching eyes. I'm in love with you too, she choked out, the admission both a relief and a torment. But I don't know what to do. My entire life. It's in Cambridge, my career, my family, Marcus. Everything is there. Rashid reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. His touch was electric. I'm not asking you to give up anything, he said softly, his voice a soothing balm on her frayed nerves. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm just telling you how I feel, what you do with that truth. That is your choice, and your choice alone. He pulled her into his arms then, and she went willingly, burying her face in his chest. He smelled of sand and sage and home. They stood there in that ancient canyon, holding each other while 2,000 years of forgotten history watched in silence. It felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. In that embrace, the carefully constructed walls around her heart crumbled into dust. Sarah knew with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating that her life had just split into two distinct paths. One path led back to Cambridge. It was paved with certainty and expectation. She would marry Marcus, become a respected professor, and live the successful, comfortable life everyone, including herself, had always planned for. The other path was a winding trail into the unknown. It meant choosing love. Choosing a man from a completely different world, with no map, no plan, and no guarantee of what would happen next. It meant leaving behind everything she had ever worked for. The safe choice was obvious. It was logical, rational, sensible. But as she stood there, held in Rashid's arms, feeling more alive than she had in her entire life, Sarah realized something profound. For the first time, she didn't want safe. She wanted real. She wanted this. The desert had taught her that the most beautiful things often grow in the harshest conditions. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest adventures begin when you leave the map behind. What would you do? Would you choose the life you planned or the love you found? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that make you think. Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like you've been following a script written for you, not by you? That's exactly where Sarah found herself. In May 2019, she came back to Cambridge from a research trip in Jordan, and her entire world tilted on its axis. Her boyfriend Marcus noticed it instantly. The moment he saw her, he knew. "You're different," he said, his eyes searching hers. Did something happen in Jordan? How do you even begin to explain a transformation like that? Sarah tried. She told him about her research, about the vast, silent beauty of the desert. She tried to put into words the profound realization she'd had, that the life she was living, the future she was building, wasn't truly hers. It was a version of herself that everyone else expected. But there was one crucial detail she left out. A name, Rashid. She didn't mention him, not at first, but Marcus wasn't a fool. After 3 years together, he could read the silence between her words. Is there someone else? He asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. The silence that followed was her answer, and it shattered him. He was devastated, his shock quickly turning to anger. "You threw away 3 years for some desert fling?" He yelled, his voice cracking. "For what, Sarah? Some romantic fantasy?" His words were like stones, but Sarah stood her ground. "It's not a fantasy," she said, her own voice quiet but firm. "It's the first real thing I've felt in years." The word real seemed to trigger something in Marcus. "Real?" He shot back, his voice rising with disbelief. "What's real about abandoning your career for someone you've known for 3 months? What's real about throwing away everything we built together?" That's when something inside Sarah snapped. "We didn't build anything." The force of her own words surprised even her. "We coexisted, Marcus. We went to each other's lectures. We were convenient." She took a breath, the painful truth finally spilling out. "But we were never really in love. Not the way we should have been." There was nothing left to say after that. Marcus left, the door closing on 3 years of shared history. But the fallout was just beginning. Her friends couldn't understand her decision. They looked at her with a mixture of pity and confusion. Her colleagues at the university started whispering behind her back whenever she walked by. The academic world, once her sanctuary, now felt hostile and judgmental. Then came the phone call with her mother. Tears, pleas, and a barrage of questions. "Sarah, what are you doing with your life?" This man, he's from a completely different world. A different culture, a different religion. What kind of future can you possibly have with him? Sarah wanted to defend Rashid. She wanted to scream that their love was real, that it was powerful enough to bridge any gap. But how could she explain it to her mother when she barely understood it herself? She was lost in a sea of doubt. The voices of her friends, her colleagues, and her mother echoed in her mind. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was being a fool, trading a secure, predictable future for a fleeting romantic fantasy. Maybe the desert hadn't been a revelation, but just a beautiful escape from a reality she didn't want to face. The weeks that followed were filled with annoying uncertainty. Every decision felt wrong. She questioned everything, her feelings for Rashid, her breakup with Marcus, her entire future. She was completely alone, caught between the life she had thrown away and a future that felt terrifyingly unclear. Was this feeling of being alive worth the chaos and the heartbreak she had caused? Was it worth the risk of it all being a terrible mistake? The doubt crept in and made a home in her heart. growing larger with each passing day. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, with no idea if she was about to fly or fall. And then, just as she was about to be consumed by her fears, the phone rang. It was July. On the other end of the line was Rashid. He had news. News that would change absolutely everything. In that single moment, as she, Sarah, I need to tell you something. Rashid's voice on the phone was tight with emotion. We'd been talking every day since I left Jordan, long, expensive international calls that left both of us exhausted but somehow still connected. He'd never once pushed me to come back. He never asked me to choose between my life in Cambridge and the one I do started to build there. He'd simply been there. What's wrong? I asked, my voice barely a whisper as a wave of panic washed over me. It's not wrong exactly. Do you remember the restoration project we were working on? The degraded lands near Wadi Rum? Of course, I said. How could I forget? That project was a piece of my heart, a puzzle I'd poured months of my life into solving. The dry, cracked earth, the resilient desert plants, the whispered stories of the Bedouin elders, it was all etched into my memory. Well, Rashid continued, the government was going to cancel it. No funding. I listened, my grip on the phone tightening. They wanted to turn that whole area into a luxury resort zone. They were a critical habitat, a fragile ecosystem hanging on by a thread. Pushed aside for hotels and swimming pools. It was a story I'd heard too many times before. But Rashid's voice lifted slightly. Your research changed that. The data you collected, the paper you've been working on, I showed it to some people. Journalists, environmental advocates, even a minister. A blueprint. If this works, it could change how we approach desert conservation across the entire region. I had to sit down. The room felt like it was spinning. This was it. They want someone to lead the project. Someone with the scientific credentials to satisfy international funders, but with the cultural understanding to work with the local communities. They asked me who I'd recommend. My heart began to pound against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat filling the silence. I knew what was coming, but I had to hear him say it. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words, spanning thousands of miles from a rainy English evening to the sun-baked Jordanian landscape. It felt like an eternity. I'm not asking you to come for me. I'm telling you that there's work here that matters. Real work. Yours, mine, the Bedouin families, the land itself. But my position at Cambridge, The words tumbled out, a weak protest against the tide pulling me back. My fellowship, my lab, the life I'd spent a decade building, the prestige, the security, everything I thought I wanted. It will always be there, he replied. Universities will always need researchers. You're one of the best. But this moment, this chance to actually do something instead of just writing about it, I won't wait. I closed my eyes, picturing the two paths stretching out before me. One was familiar, paved with academic achievement and the quiet respect of my peers. The other was a dusty, uncertain track leading into the heart of the desert toward a future I couldn't predict. You're asking me to give up everything I've worked for. No, Rashid said firmly, his voice cutting through my doubt. I'm showing you that you've been working toward this all along. You just didn't know it yet? Everything you've studied, every paper you've written, every moment you spent under that desert sun, it was all leading you to this point. This isn't giving up, it's stepping up. For the first time in a long time, it felt foreign. My real home, my real work, was waiting for me under a different sun in a land of red sand and ancient wisdom. He was right. This wasn't a choice between two careers. It was a choice between the life I had planned. Sarah didn't decide that night or the next week. She talked to her best friend, who looked her straight in the eye and said, "You've been different since Jordan, alive." Next, she spoke to her department head, bracing for a lecture, but instead, he was surprisingly supportive. "This is career suicide in one sense," he admitted. "You're leaving the academic track. But in another, you're doing what most of us only write about. You're doing field research that actually matters. If I were your age again, I might just choose the same." His words gave her an unexpected sense of validation, but the knot in her stomach remained. Finally, she called her mother. Through tears, her mom's voice was gentle. "I just want you to be happy, darling." And you haven't been happy in a very long time. The raw honesty of it hit her hard. Everyone else could see what she was struggling to admit to herself. But the most important conversation was still waiting to happen. The one she needed to have with herself. One quiet night, alone in her Cambridge flat, surrounded by books and the weight of expectation, Sarah pulled out her research notes from her time in Jordan. They were filled with pages and pages of data, observations, and intricate sketches, the evidence of her promising career. But mixed in with the academic work were other notes. Personal, almost secret observations she had jotted down in moments of quiet reflection. One read, "Rashid showed me a plant today that flowers only once every 5 years. He said the Bedouin believe patience is the greatest wisdom." Another said, "Watched the sunrise from the red cliffs this morning." I felt more myself in that single moment than I have in years. And then, the one that stopped her breath. "Is it possible to belong to a place you've barely known? Because the desert feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been." Staring at her own handwriting, Sarah realized she'd been asking herself the completely wrong question all along. This wasn't about, should I give up my career for love? The real question was much deeper, much more fundamental. What does a life well lived actually look like? And as she looked at the notes from the desert, the answer bloomed in her heart, clear and undeniable. It wasn't about prestige or following a pre-written script. It was about feeling alive, about finding a place where her soul could breathe. So in September 2019, Sarah walked into her department head's office with a calm resolve she hadn't felt in years. She officially resigned from Cambridge. She turned down the tenure-track position that others would have fought for. She started giving away her belongings, feeling lighter with each box she packed. And then she booked a one-way ticket to Jordan. Her colleagues were baffled. They whispered that she'd lost her mind, throwing away such a brilliant future. Some of her friends stopped calling, unable to understand a choice that defied all conventional logic. But for the first time in her life, Sarah was certain. Fast forward to today, the year is 2026. Sarah is 35. She and Rashid are raising two beautiful children, a daughter named Layla and a son named Omar. It's a busy, lively household, filled with the sounds of two languages, two cultures, as the kids learn to navigate both worlds with a natural ease that still amazes Sarah. She's not in a lab at Cambridge anymore. Instead, Sarah runs a thriving nonprofit organization. It's a unique venture that bridges the gap between cutting-edge international environmental science and the rich, traditional ecological knowledge of the Middle East. Her work is her passion. It takes her all over the world, to climate conferences in Geneva, to fundraising galas in New York, to workshops where she shares the model they've built. But no matter how far she travels, she always comes home. Home to Jordan. Home to the vast, quiet beauty of the desert. Home to Rashid. The journey wasn't without its bumps. Healing her relationship with her family took time, patience, and a lot of love. But now, when her mother visits, she dotes on her grandchildren, her eyes shining with pride. She's even learned to cook mansaf, the quintessential Jordanian dish, a gesture of love that speaks volumes. And what about Marcus, her ex-boyfriend from Cambridge? Life moved on for him too. He ended up marrying another academic, and they're both professors now, living the life they always envisioned. Sarah is genuinely happy for him. He found the path that was right for him, just as she found hers. It's a quiet, mutual understanding, a shared history that has settled into a peaceful memory. Of course, not everyone from her old life understands. Some of her former colleagues from Cambridge still shake their heads. They see her choice as a waste of potential. A brilliant mind, a promising career, and groundbreaking research, all seemingly thrown away for marriage, for a life in the Middle East, for a small nonprofit. They just don't get it. But others do. The ones who see her at conferences notice the change. It's not just her expertise they see, but something deeper. They see how present she is when she speaks, how her passion for her work radiates from her, how fundamentally content she seems. One old colleague pulled her aside after a talk recently. "You glow, Sarah," she said. "You used to be brilliant but brittle. Now you're brilliant and whole. And that wholeness is making an impact far beyond her home." The desert restoration model that Sarah and her team developed in Jordan is now being implemented in other arid regions in Palestine, in Iraq, even in Morocco. She is proving to the world that meaningful environmental work isn't confined to Western labs and universities. It's happening on the ground, in partnership with the people who have lived in harmony with the land for millennia, whose wisdom is an invaluable resource. Every morning, Sarah wakes up to the soft light of the desert sun. She looks over at Rashid, still sleeping beside her, and hears the cheerful chatter of her children playing in a seamless mix of Arabic and English. In these quiet moments, she knows, with every fiber of her being, that she made the right choice. Her life isn't a fairy tale. It's not perfect. Parenting is a constant challenge, a mix of incredible joy and utter exhaustion. Securing funding for the nonprofit is a never-ending battle. And some days, the cultural gap between her American upbringing and her life in Jordan feels like a vast, unbridgeable chasm. It's not an easy life, but it's real. And most importantly, it's hers. Authentically, entirely, and unapologetically hers. She didn't find herself by climbing higher on the academic ladder. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but something still feels wrong? You're checking all the boxes, good job, stable life, a path that everyone agrees is smart and successful. But late at night, when everything's quiet, you feel a sense of emptiness. You're not alone. This is the story of Sarah, a woman who had it all and gave it all up for a life that was truly her own. And her story might just change how you see yours. Sarah was a brilliant researcher at Cambridge. On paper, her life was perfect. She was on a fast track to success, surrounded by intellectual prestige. She was making all the right choices. But the truth was, she was miserable. Day in and day out, she felt like she was playing a part, living a life that was expected of her, not one she had chosen for herself. The success felt hollow, the achievements like someone else's. Young women often email Sarah, students and researchers who've heard about her dramatic life change. They all ask the same thing: how did you know? How did you know it was the right choice to leave everything behind? And Sarah's answer is always startlingly honest. She tells them, I didn't know. That is the thing about big life changes. You never really know until you re on the other side. Imagine the fear, the sheer terror of walking away from a life you spent years building. Sarah was terrified. She cried. She was plagued by doubt. There were countless nights she lay awake, convinced she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had traded the historic halls of Cambridge for the vast, unpredictable expanse of the desert, a wrong choice by every conventional measure. But as she would later realize, that wrong choice ended up saving her life. Here's the powerful lesson she learned, a lesson that applies to all of us. We spend so much time and energy trying to avoid making the wrong choices. We strategize, we plan, we seek approval, all to make sure we stay on the right path. But we so rarely stop to ask ourselves a much more important question. Are our right choices actually making us happy? Are they filling us with joy, or are they slowly draining the life out of us? Sarah's story isn't about telling everyone to quit their job and run off to the desert. It's not a call to abandon responsibility or chase some romantic fantasy. It's about something much deeper, much more personal. It's about having the courage to look at your own life right now and ask if you're living by your own values or by someone else's. It's about the courage to admit when success doesn't feel successful. The courage to choose a life of meaning over a life of prestige. The courage to face the terrifying prospect of rebuilding when you realize the life you've so carefully constructed just doesn't fit the person you've become. The desert became Sarah's greatest teacher. In its quiet, unforgiving landscape, she found a profound truth. As she often says, the desert taught me that the most dangerous thing isn't change. It's staying in a place where you're slowly dying inside. Think about that for a moment. We fear the unknown, the leap into something new. But what if the real danger is in the familiar? In the slow, quiet erosion of our spirit in a life that no longer serves us? Most people will never make a change as dramatic as Sarah's. And that's okay. Not everyone needs to. The point isn't the action itself, but the inquiry that precedes it. Everyone, at some point, needs to ask themselves the question, the real question: is this the life I truly want, or is it just the life I think I should want? Take a moment to be honest with yourself. When you strip away the expectations of your family, your friends, and society, what's left? What does your soul actually crave? The moment you start asking that question with radical honesty, everything begins to change. It's not about having all the answers. Sarah didn't have them. It's about being brave enough to live in the question. That's where true transformation begins. It's in the small shifts, the tiny rebellions against the shoulds, and the gradual alignment with what truly matters to you. Maybe it's taking that art class you've always dreamed of. Maybe it's setting a boundary you've been afraid to set. Or maybe it's just admitting to yourself for the first time that you're not happy, and that's okay. So I leave you with that question. The same one Sarah's journey forces us to confront. Is the life you're living making you feel alive? Because you deserve a life that does. Sarah and Rashid's story continues, and let me tell you, it's not some fairy tale, it's real life. They fight just like any couple. They argue about money, about the best way to raise their kids, and the classic one whose family gets the holiday visit this year. But through all of that, they're partners. True partners in the deepest sense of the word. They're building a life together, brick by brick, A life that holds meaning for both of them, not just one. And what about that restoration project they started? It's exploded beyond what anyone, even Sarah, could have ever imagined. We're not talking about a small patch of land anymore. Thousands of acres of desert have been brought back to life. Dozens of local communities have been empowered, given new skills, new opportunities, new hope. Their project has become a blueprint, a model for success that's now being adopted and spread across multiple countries. It's a ripple effect of positive change, starting from one brave decision. Now, you might be wondering about Sarah, the brilliant academic. Does she miss the hallowed halls of Cambridge? Well, she still publishes research, but there's a huge difference. Her work isn't just theoretical anymore, designed to fill the pages of a journal. It's practical, born from the real, tangible work happening on the ground. Her insights emerge from the dirt, from the successes and failures of restoring the land. Ironically, she's changed more lives from the middle of the desert than she ever could have from her prestigious office in Cambridge. But here's the most important part of her transformation. It's not about the career change or the impact she's having, as incredible as that is. It's about her living a life that is authentically, unapologetically her asterisk. She found her true self, not in a library, but under the vast desert sky. So what's the big takeaway from all this? What's the lesson we can pull from Sarah's incredible journey? Maybe it is this: the life you think you supposed asterisk to live, and the life you are truly meant asterisk to live are often two very different paths. We're all given a script by society, by our families, by our own expectations. But sometimes the bravest, most courageous thing you can possibly do is to rip up that script and disappoint those expectations. We're taught to see success as a ladder. Climb, climb, climb. Higher salary, bigger title, more prestige. But what if success isn't a ladder at all? What if it's a compass? A compass that points you toward your true north, toward what genuinely makes you feel alive. And if you have a compass, you have to be willing to change direction, especially when you realize you've been climbing a ladder leaning against the wrong wall, toward a goal you don't even want anymore. For Sarah, love was the catalyst. It was Rashid who opened the door to a different world. But the real journey, the profound adventure, was the one she took internally. It was the journey of discovering who she was when she stripped away all the shoulds and supposed tos. All the external pressures, all the voices telling her who to be. When you look at it, Sarah didn't just leave Cambridge for the desert. On a much deeper level, she left the person she was pretending to be to finally embrace the person she truly was. And in the grand scheme of things, that's the only choice that really matters. Making the choice to be you. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. Share it with someone in your life who might need a little encouragement to follow their own compass. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me, what is one thing you would do differently if you weren't afraid of what anyone else would think? Sometimes hearing a story about someone else's courage is the exact spark we need to find our own. This has been a love born in the desert. Thanks for watching.